All right, everyone. The red light is on, and we are recording. This is Mark back for another episode of the Veteran Semi-Professional. So today's an interview episode where I'm bringing a veteran on about their life and career after the military. All in an effort if you're trying to figure out what am I going to do once I can put my hands back in my pockets, grow out my beard, and start wearing these things, kind of quote unquote civilian clothes. Well, this is the show for you. I bring people on. We talk about what they've been up to after the military. We talk about their own personal military transition, all in effort to help you and your family feel more confident about what life can be like after the uniform. So super excited for today's guest. Jason and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and I really like what he does. And so we're going to be talking specifically about what Jason's been up to, the business that he's building, and also how that's directly pertinent to this audience as they're trying to think about or plan for post military life. So Jason, if you can take a minute, introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it, man.
Hey, good day, Mark. It's really good to talk with you and your audience today. Like I said, I was looking through when we first met, and it was November 2021. So back in Houston for a Mark Rockefeller event. That was a good time.
Yeah, that was a cool event.
So for the audience, my name is Jason Anderson. I was in the Air Force for 20 years. During those 20 years, I kind of break my career into halves. The first half was flying the mighty C-130 Hercules. I flew in three wars, combat missions in Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq. The last half of my career was highly internationally focused and honestly a little bit like completely off normal career pathway where I was an exchange pilot to the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. I was actually in a Japanese squadron for 5 years. Preceding that was a year with my wife, my newlywed wife at the time, in Tokyo doing language immersion. Following the 5 year stint with the Japan Air Self-Defense Force, finished 6 years at the Pentagon, and that kind of concluded my career. At the Pentagon, I was selling defense equipment and hardware to Japan, so it kind of made sense.
Love it, love it. Okay, I try not to integrate too many war stories in here, but I'll just share a quick one with you right now, Jason. So I was a jump master in the 82nd Airborne. Okay, and it was my first ever time doing jump master duties, and I was flying on a C-130. Okay, and so for those of you who maybe not aware, right, there's like a whole bunch of paratroopers in the back of the plane, and as a jump master, one of your responsibilities is to inspect the door of the aircraft before everyone goes jumps out of it. Okay, and at some point you're actually like leaning outside of the airplane to go look around and such. Well, right as I leaned, the pilot, and I don't know if maybe someone had told this person like, hey, we got a fresh jump master back here, let's screw up with him or something, I don't know. Right as I was like leaning outside, he banked hard to my side, so I go from like looking at horizon to just straight down to the ground. Okay, and like pull myself back in, and I look at the Lodi's eyes are like as big as dinner plates, and he was like, dude, I'm sorry, man. I don't know. And then we get on the ground, and everyone was like, Delaney, I was 100% sure you were about to fall out of the airplane right there. Luckily, I was strapped in, would have been fine, just would have missed the drop zone by miles and such. Awesome, cool.
I was
Well,
going to
thanks
say
for that.
that would have been fun to be part of that because, somebody had to take a picture or something, if it was
I
like,
know, I know. They were really pressing down on having cameras inside the aircraft at that point, precisely probably for catching screw ups like that. Well, talk me through your personal transition from the Air Force, Jason. Kind of good, bad, ugly, sideways. Talk me through, places, some speed bumps you personally encountered, and maybe some bright spots you had as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. So, the way I describe a military transition is really it's a physiological event. Let me kind of walk through that for a minute. So, even though I knew I was retiring in 2014, it was right around the 2011 and 12 period, which I think is totally common, where your mind starts talking to you and says, "What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?" And I remember trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I remember thinking, geez, how do I think about this? And it was really weird because, all of us coming out of the military, very educated, very driven, typically type A. And when you can't see a future for yourself, it becomes extremely concerning, right? So what I did at that time is I started kind of leaning into small business development, I would call it. So much so that I actually wrote a book called Active Duty Entrepreneur, because I really do believe in the system where if you want to build a small business, being in the military is a great time to do it on the side, nights and weekends and stuff like that, because you're getting your health care paid for, you're getting a salary, And so long as it's not really interrupting your day job, putting in the good work for the taxpayer, it's a really good time in a structured environment where you're not losing anything. So initially, I went into small business development. And then as I got really close to my transition, we had made the decision to move back to Wyoming. I'm from Jackson, Wyoming, good old Jackson. Wanted to go back home. My father was there. He was getting old. My brother was there. So relationship wise, it was really important for me to get back to family after being gone for 24 years. So as we got back to Wyoming, going back to my 6 years of Pentagon time, I had a lot of people who would come in and talk to me, defense contractors, right? Defense, private sector contractors. And a couple of my friends, when I got back to Wyoming, I was really going to do the small business thing. And we had developed a fledgling company at that point, not PreVeteran, another company at that point. And those folks that came in and talked to me from actually the company was Rockwell Collins, based in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, kind of encouraged me to look at this business development position they had open. It was an entry-level business development manager role for Air Force programs, and they said, "Hey, Jason, you're a good fit." So after listening to them, I was kind of like, "Nah, I think I'm good." You know, I want to do small business, and a little bit of ignorance there, actually, probably a lot of ignorance there. Through a little more encouragement of from them, I applied for the job, and this is where I might be, a little bit lucky, unicorn, whatever you want to call it. But I made one resume, I interviewed with one company, and got the job. Um, I'll kind of progress through there because I know we want to get through this stuff, but I really love the company. It was a $6 billion kind of annual revenue company based in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It ran like a small business. It was awesome. You knew all the leaders, you knew the damn CEO. I mean, it was just a really family run-ish business. So after doing BD work for a year, about 6 months in, there were a couple events that happened, but they asked me if I wanted to become the managing director for Japan, Korea, Taiwan. So this would be a huge leap up, a couple, three or four levels of employment going from entry level to executive. But ended up kind of pursuing that and getting that job. So within a year, I'm now the managing director of Japan, Korea, Taiwan. We're expatriated with an expat package to Tokyo, Japan. It was absolutely incredible. I stayed there 9 years, not there in Japan, but with the company for 9 years as it went through the evolution of Rockwell Collins, Collins Aerospace, RTX, Raytheon Technologies, and then left in 2022. But Mark, what I want to talk to you about with that journey in transition, on paper, I did great, right? I was progressing very quickly. I was making a lot of money, good money. We were living in Tokyo. We got to do remote stuff in Jackson Hole, right, my hometown. But the kind of sadder part of the story there is I was not prepared for those roles at all. How to perform in those roles, and I think that conversation is completely absent from the military transition space because we're still focusing on getting jobs, which I think is absolutely critical, by the way, absolutely critical. But there's a completely different discussion and segment where we need to talk about performance, and I just was not prepared at all to perform.
That's such a great distinction. A lot of people are listening to your story right now and being like, "How do I get that job, Jason? How do I follow your path and become managing director based out of Tokyo?" Right? Uh, and we see this all the time where I can't remember the exact statistics off the top of my head, but like veterans end up at places and then end up leaving very quickly. Okay. And there's a lot of mismatch that happens there, but you have to imagine both on the company and the veteran side that they're just not performing. Okay. And everyone loses in that equation. And so yes, we focus a lot on just the like getting your butt in the seat at the office, but not necessarily doing a good job there to provide value to you and the company that hires you. So I'm really glad you brought up that distinction.
Yeah, I think it's really important because to me, it feels like the space is not really well structured or defined right now, which is something we're definitely working on getting past. I'll show you a few slides here and we'll talk through it through your listening audience here for a moment. But the performance piece is huge. The service member, me, you, when we left, we want to perform well. We want to do well. We want to be part of an organization that we align with. We want to know where we fit into the organization. We want to perform our role as best we can so we can bring our considerable talents to bear. But I can tell you, having done this for a long time, and by the way, the stats you're looking for, there was a 2014 study by VetVisor and Syracuse University that said 50% leave within 12 months, 65% leave within 2 years. I can tell you that we looked back 30 years, going back to right around when TAP was created in 91, and it's been that way consistently. So that wasn't like a one-off study. And Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers show high turnover rate in those first 2 years. So imagine that. So if there's high turnover rate, there can't be good performance, right? I mean, they're kind of tied essentially.
Yeah. So for everyone listening on here, so one of the reasons I was excited to have Jason come on is you have some divergent opinions, I think, from what you'll see from a lot of quote unquote transition gurus out there on LinkedIn and such. And what I love is you have the data to pack everything up and kind of really show us what's going on. Um, so this might be a good point to just ask the question of when did the idea for pre-veteran pop in your head of this is something I want to go start running down?
Oh, this is such a like every story is very circuitous. There is no direct line to anything in this world.
Right, right.
So it's kind of interesting. I'll do the highlight right now. So when I told you earlier on in this that I had written a book called Active Duty Entrepreneur, I really did want to encourage people to explore small business while they're in the military to see if it's a good fit while they're in a stable environment. Kind of a funny but kind of more destiny driven story is I had started like a website to sell the book, right? And the website was called Active Duty Entrepreneur, and it was up for all of about 2 months before a very well-known magazine came along and said, you will cease and desist using that name in order to sell books. I mean, they were really nice about it, but it was kind of like, you're not going to call your business that. And I was like, okay. But honestly, you kind of listen to what the universe is telling you. And I had already kind of had the understanding, I guess, intuitively at that time that small business is such a tiny segment of any population, less than 4% anywhere. There's entrepreneurship, kind of any country, any demographic, it's really small. So kind of around that same time when the cease and desist letter came along, I decided I wanted to do something more broad. So my wife and I were driving back we were at DC at the time at the Pentagon, right? Because I was doing this side hustle, or not pre-veteran, but active duty entrepreneur. We're driving back from New York, and I'm like, I want to do something. It needs to be more expansive. And I'm sitting here thinking, it's before you become, get out of the military. It's before you're a veteran. It's pre-veteran. I mean, no joke right there. Literally, it kind of just opened up the doors. Of course, you go to like GoDaddy or whatever I used as a domain, found out that word did not exist in the English language anywhere on the planet, which means the planet's kind of aligned early on. That didn't mean anything, by the way. There was so much work after that, but it was an insight into the world where you're like, interesting, and it says everything I want to say about it. Because service members, I am the biggest advocate for them, despite what some of the more traditional folks in the transition space say. I'm a fierce advocate for them, but I'm a fierce advocate in getting them aligned to the private sector. Because once they do that, they are literally unstoppable. It's just there's a big system right now that's kind of standing in the way of that.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about this system. If you want to pull up, so
Yep.
Jason and I are going to have some slides. I know most of you are probably listening to this right now, so you're not going to see them. This is just kind of help facilitate some conversation between Jason and I, and I'll explain what's going on where necessary. But don't for everyone listening out there, don't lose focus that we've got some slides in the background. Okay.
Okay, so let me kind of walk the whole audience through this. So the slide I've got up right now is essentially two circles. They represent two different environments. One is the military environment, one is the private sector environment. And what I'm describing right now is essentially the TAP, Transition Assistance Framework, that was delivered in 1991 to the audience. What's interesting about TAP, and no one's really thought about it, and or at least I haven't heard it put this way outside of what we're saying right now. It was a program that was built behind the scenes and then delivered to the stakeholders, delivered to the service members, goes, here's your program. Uh, I don't know if anyone asked for it. I don't know if they explained the methodology or what problem they're trying to fix. They said, Doink, here's your program, start using it. And predictably, right, when a huge government kind of says, here's your program, people are like, okay, stakeholders jump in, service providers jump in, interagency jumps in, all these different things. And they work within the constrained environment or within the constructed environment, rather. So here's the problem. As best we can ascertain, back in 90, before it was published in 91, someone took a commercial model off the shelf, and I'll verbally go through this. A commercial model to get from one environment to the other, or employment in a broader sense, network, interview, build a resume, right? So that's your normal stuff that military and non-military alike should use or should deploy to go get a job. The one recognition of the differences in systems was translate skills, right? So if you translate skills, network, interview, build a resume, you're good. And to this day, that's what you hear. You hear it everywhere. So the translate skills has become an obsession over the last, 30 years, right? It's been a real focus area. But what I really want to bring your audience's attention to is when they created this system, they actually implied that these systems are the same, right? Meaning, hey, they're substantially similar enough so the service member can seamlessly go from the military to the private sector. And let me show you why that's flawed.
Okay, yeah. So, one, if you anybody has gone through TAP, if you've already exited the military and gone through SFL TAP or whatever your service calls it, somewhere in there you have to do the MOS crosswalk. That's like a mandatory thing, at least as it was a couple of years ago when I got out, right? Which is like that's like the actual thing that we all had to do to quote unquote translate our skills. Okay, and your assumption there is correct. Like I had to figure out how do I talk about jumping out of an airplane in the middle of the night to go set up an ambush somewhere, and then translate that to being a product manager at Meta or whatever it is, right? But we have inherently different languages and environments there, and maybe that translation cannot be just a one for one exchange.
In fact, what I'm encouraging, we'll get to the solution here in a minute. We're still talking about the problem just for a couple slides, but we do have a solution. The problem with that is I don't want to use the word translate anymore. I think it's a horrible idea. Let me explain why, like very simply. Translate means you're staying the same. You're just simply translating what you're doing. We believe you actually need to change, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I don't like the translate. It's like putting a veneer on yourself, right? Where we don't want to do that and look businessy or look employmenty, because someone's going to see a veneer and go, there's something under that that doesn't make sense, right? So just hold that thought for a minute.
Okay.
So what I want to do is then kind of prove, in a sense, that that claim we just made that the system was set up and implied that the systems are similar, therefore the service member kind of can transfer seamlessly to the private sector is deeply flawed. So why I can say that claim are these are the following messages that service members hear, and maybe your audience will give it a chuckle, but tell me if you've heard these yourself, Mark, right? So, hey, Mark, you're highly skilled and capable. Hey,
Yep,
Mark,
definitely heard that one.
hey, Mark, you'll fit right into any organization.
Yep, totally.
Hey, Mark, companies are waiting to hire you the second that you put in your papers.
I was under the impression that after I got my DD 214 and walked off base, there was just going to be a fleet of limos filled with executives, just offers in hand, waiting to greet me as I exited Fort Bragg. But it didn't happen, Jason.
You got it, right? So then finally, hey, Mark, you're going to make six figures, no doubt about it,
Yeah, for sure. Everyone does right after the military, right?
right? So this is proof of my claim. And since we talked to so many people and so many organizations, these messages are still everywhere. This is what the service members hearing. So think about the confusion that takes place. And this is what the next slide I want to show you. So how is the service member supposed to process that information, right? So on one side, um, they hear the messages that, hey, you're good to go, you can seamlessly transfer, and then internally they're like, something's off, right? I'm not ready, I'm not feeling it. And I remember intensely, even though it was 10, 12 years ago, in any 1 hour, I would feel totally ready and good to go, depending on what I'm processing in my mind at the moment, right? 2 hours later, something comes up I don't know, and I feel completely distressed. So you have huge highs and huge lows that you go through on a daily basis, which creates all kinds of like havoc, both internally, externally with your relationships and things like that.
I'm remembering, I cannot remember the guy's name. It was a guest I had 2 years ago or something, and he was 10, 15 years post Marine Corps and was talking about how he felt like he was still kind of transitioning a little bit. And so just case example of that disconnect where the world was kind of telling him like, "Oh, you're out, like you're ready, right?" But internally he was like, "I'm still going through the process a little bit."
Right. And I think again, we'll get to the solution here in a minute, but I'm really nailing down the problem. I think I have one or two more slides just to kind of show you. So let me go back. So when you talk about service member confusion, and again, it's not the service member, it's not on them, it's on the system, and then it plays out within the service member. Huge distinction, right? So again, fierce advocate, but I know that all of us are being set up for failure right now because it creates this massive confusion, right? So when you're massively confused or at least unsure, think about what happens from a behavior standpoint. So what happens is you're like, hey, I'm going to go use the GI Bill, right? So you talk about the student, student veteran kind of segment, and what they do is they go into extended transition. Why do they go into extended transition? Because they're uncomfortable, they're unsure what to do. They have an entitlement. They go use the GI Bill. Guess what happens? They don't graduate. It takes them longer to get a cert, longer to get a degree. And we talk to universities right now, and they go into the first year, not quite sure, hadn't quite done the due diligence, end up figuring out that's not the degree I want. So now they're already behind their progression as a higher ed student, and then they don't graduate. So you could just see how this plays out downstream from the confusion. Everything downstream suffers. Most of all, the service member and their family, right? And that's why it's important to fix this. So from an employment standpoint, if you've got that service member who's unsure, they more than likely, I'd say 99.99% of the time, without training, have not done the due diligence to figure out what industry and company they want to go into, right? So what happens behaviorally downstream from that is, companies spend a ton of money on job fairs, and honestly, they're ineffective at best. At best, they're ineffective. Because again, the service member is not aware that they need to do the due diligence, doesn't know how to do the due diligence, has been told they'll seamlessly transfer from one environment to the other. So they go to job fairs and they go up to companies and go, "What do you do? What's your company do?" And that's just not the right interaction, right? We want to be better set up. SkillBridge doesn't work, right? So SkillBridge, everyone kind of sees the symptoms out there, right? They just recoiled the program big time, mandated that companies give a certain percentage of offers to participants, but what they don't realize is the system has set them up so poorly that the service member picks a skill bridge, not the skill bridge, which means everyone loses. The service member loses, they don't get the offer. The company loses because they don't get the employee. And then the service loses because they lose that individual for 90 to 120 days to do the skill bridge.
Well, I gotta say, just two here, Jason. I'm guilty on at least like two of these things that you brought up. Right, I was getting out of the army and was like, I don't know what the hell I want to do right now. Uh, I had the GI Bill. My grandfather went to school in the GI Bill. My dad went to school in the GI Bill. My dad was like, "Dude, use the damn GI Bill." Right. So I'm like, and I remember that my first iteration of essays for MBA programs, I wrote in there, I'm like, I need a break. Like this is the reason I want to go get an MBA right now. Okay. And the first veteran, from one of the schools, he looked over it, responded back to me and was like, "Hey man, listen, like this is what we all say, and like this is what we're all thinking internally. Like you can't just say that." But like so much of us were like, dude, I need a knee after 2 years because like was still in the transition process. Okay. I also was someone who went and did a skill bridge. It was great. I got to kind of like, skate out of my unit for 90 days in all honesty. At that point, like they had kind of written me off. I just come back from deployment and they're like, Mark's out the door anyway, right? Uh, but like it honestly really wasn't a fantastic experience. And then like the company that I did my skill bridge at was truly not positioned to hire me on the back end. So it was just like this. I caught it right at the right time where it was like a bureaucratic loophole, more or less, that I was able to take advantage of. And I've seen that happen with a lot of people over the last couple of years.
Right. And again, dude, I'm not here to kind of point fingers at you or anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not. That's what I'm saying is you can just see the system is not good, right?
Right.
Systemically, it's broken. Now, there's ways to fix that, but what we're doing at PreVeteran, I'll kind of show you this next thing. Now, let's talk about the solution, right? The
Please.
solution is really important. So, believe it or not, the solution is actually simple. Mark's like, no, you're full of it, man. I've been told it's really complex. It's really convoluted. That's what they say. It's not true. It's actually really simple to fix. But it starts off with this, right? The solution is, and again, I'm showing slides to Mark, but for the listening audience, again, we have these two environments, right? We got the military environment and it's a circle, got the private sector environment, it's another circle, and I've got a big does not equal sign between the two now, right? So the point I'm making is as stakeholders, as service members, as the government, as higher ed, whatever entity, in concert, we need to be telling service members right now, starting today, hey, Mark, the military and the private sector environments are drastically different. Mark, you were brought in the Army, right? You were trained intentionally. The Army is a very unique operating system. You have developed thinking and decision making skills to be optimized for that environment. Mark, the private sector is very different. It has very different objectives. It's a very different environment. You need training in order to be optimized for that environment. And what would you say to that, Mark?
I think it makes complete and total sense. And the analogy I'm also thinking of here is in the private sector doesn't look at two different industries and say, "Oh, these are exactly the same." You spent, the last 10 years working in banking. Great, you're a perfect fit for, I don't know, technology, like big tech, just because you were in the kind of quote unquote big private sector, right? Like your back industry experience in the private sector matters big time in, like, if you want to transition into a new industry or a new function or something. But we in the kind of the veteran world are just saying like, oh, they're the same thing, right? When they're just not. It's two dramatically different industries.
Exactly. But what's nice about the simplicity of this approach is
Yeah.
I'm capitalizing on the service members' just intuition,
Yeah.
logic, and everything. And what you do in going through this exercise is once they know they're different, and I can tell you after talking to lots and lots of service members 99.99% of the time go, makes sense. What do you want me to do? And there's no barrier anymore. None, right? They don't fight it at all. They're like, what do you want me to do? Right? It just makes sense. So the answer is, I mean, I don't have the image here, but like you create a bridge between the two environments. All right. So that is what's required to kind of make this work is there needs to be training and the training, by the way, to be more specific, it needs to be highly individual, it needs to be transformative, and it needs to be scalable, right? So this is something PreVeteran's been doing for the past 5 years, but we've gotten really good at it for the individual service member to begin bridging the gap between the military environment and the private sector environment.
What I like about what you're saying, Jason, is this audience is really good, I think, at seeing through bullshit. And like we know how to say, like, people know this truth that like these two systems have just not been working correctly together. Like the system has not been working together, and these two worlds that we're saying the same are just not the same. Like everyone knows it, and it just kind of needs someone to just split them down the middle and say like these are not it. And as soon as you say it, everyone's like, yeah, obviously, like we've all been knowing this for years, but we've been trying to make like, the HDMI cord go into the USB cord and it's just not working out well, right?
But isn't that interesting? Because there are stakeholders out there, just to be clear, right? And I'm not disparaging them or anything, but there definitely is a group out there that says, "Hey, you're ready to go when you leave the military." There is, right?
Totally, totally.
And I don't know if they're doing a huge service. I get why they're doing it because they're really trying to help, and I do believe they're really trying to help. Unfortunately, unless you're getting training to fully understand the private sector, and more importantly, your thinking and decision making that needs to change, because the way we do training is essentially it's private sector orientation training, right? But that's way too simplistic in its description. In order to acclimate to a new environment, you actually have to develop experiences in that environment. You don't need to be in that environment, but you need to be speaking with that environment a lot. So it's informational interviews, but it's also very targeted analysis or reflection of how you're processing that information, how you're capturing that information, and how you're imprinting this on your mind. Because what we really need to do to solve this problem at large is to begin giving service members back their autonomy, right? We talk a lot about self-authoring, agency, and autonomy, right? Service members are the last people on earth that want to be given stuff. And let me caveat that. They don't want handouts, they want tools, right? They want to create a better life for themselves. But the current system, it just doesn't mix with that. So, what's really important to us is acclimating you to the private sector, making sure you feel comfortable in the private sector, not just understanding it, but operating in it. Once you do that, you kind of are unstoppable, right? Because you feel comfortable there. And what we refer to this in our program is private sector identity development, right? So guess what? When you develop a new private sector identity and start working that pathway, your military identity is intact, but it starts to become a bit muted, which is exactly what it should do, right? Because you become a little bit of a different person. Again, kind of going back to the system setup, we don't want people to live in their military identity until they pass, right? That's not good for anybody. Because even if you're enlisted, remember about 80% of the people who retire, so those are the long ones, 80% of the people who retire within the first 5 years of retirement. So, most people enlisted are going to be 38 when they retire. Most officers are going to be 42. They still have 25, 30 years in the workforce. I mean, it's a lot. And when we say private sector environment, we're not just talking about employment, we're talking about a host of other things within the private sector environment: mental health, financial, insurance. It's a different environment, so you have to process it differently. But again, the tool of just saying how different they are really opens up the opportunity for the individual to get training to be fully optimized for that private sector environment.
Is this a good place, Jason, to kind of ask the question of like, what does the training environment for pre-veteran look like? If someone comes to one of your programs, what does that curriculum, what does the process look like for somebody going through?
No, that's perfect. So ultimately, and this isn't absolute, but like the ideal candidate is someone that's 18 months to 3 years before they leave the military, whether it's separating or retiring. And honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're enlisted. It doesn't matter if you're officer. What we've discovered is deeper than rank and age is our training, right? So we all actually think extremely similarly, regardless of that, because we were trained very similarly. So I know that kind of goes without saying. So we have a what we call the military to corporate training system. For our individual service members, like I said, ideally 18 months to 3 years. We pick that because your last 12 months is extremely busy, and you need to get ahead of that. It's really busy because you're trying to get out of the military. It's really busy because you have a lot going on without processing and stuff like that. And then on top of that, you're doing additional duties and stuff like that to make sure you're getting a job. So 18 months, 3 years before you get out, we put you into a 5 week course. It's called the Employment Prep Course. We hold these cohorts 3 times a year: spring, summer, and fall. During that 5 weeks, we start acquainting you with the private sector, right? So we're giving you initial framework, tools, and support to begin becoming autonomous in the private sector environment. And once you kind of gain the confidence in that, you're kind of on a new trajectory towards success. But we recognize that 5 weeks is not enough, right? 5 weeks is just the beginning to kind of get the basics, but then after that course, 5 week course, you go into our pre-veteran alumni community. And within the community, kind of consider that ongoing training. And when I mean ongoing training, it's very topical that covers many different items that you have to do: VA claims, financial services, insurance, mortgages, and things like that. But um, you need to be able to have some type of subject matter expertise on those. So we have subject matter experts in there that provide webinars, Q&As, and things like that. So, and then service members, depending on where they are in their transition, they get this content when they need it. So it's actually just a phenomenal new way to deliver content. And the other part of that is our 5 week course going from there into the community. What's interesting about that is it's very scalable, right? So our 5 week course is delivered via a learning management system. And because we're not trying, we're bridging gaps, right? We're bridging between the military and the private sector. It's actually really short amount of content. Like our students each week kind of report back to us that as they're building tools, they only need like 60 to 90 minutes per week. So it fits into the busiest of schedules, whether you're deployed, whether you're TDY, you can do it. And more importantly, you have to do it in our view, right? To be successful, because once you recognize the problem of having to bridge between the two environments, you got to do it. Now you need a framework, you need tools, you need support, you need a model to kind of lean into. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I want to talk about something, and then I want to get into results and maybe feedback from the alumni group and everything. So for everyone listening, they might be kind of wondering this question here of like, okay, are you guys a nonprofit? Is this a for-profit business? Talk about, I guess, who you are and maybe why you made that distinction.
Absolutely. So PreVeteran is proudly a for-profit company. The reason why I say that is because, and maybe when you kind of led off with this podcast, you mentioned that we're very antithetical, perhaps, to the rest of the market. So um, we are for profit, and it's for one reason, right? And it's because we believe what we're telling you, meaning the private sector environment is a fee for service model all day long, right? It's very common. I never understood why military people are exempt from, they're the only ones on the planet who don't have to pay for stuff, and that needs to continue into perpetuity. We actually think that's negative for them because that creates a really bizarre behavior pattern as they go into the private sector and then kind of expect stuff, which no one else gets. And it's really setting them up actually for failure. So it was really important for us to do that. And, again, the nonprofits out there are doing good work, right? Typically, the folks that are out there are doing 11 to 14-week programs. That's a lot of time commitment, right? Ours is 5 weeks and really 60 to 90 minutes per week. So it's very targeted and very effective. So it was really important for us to make a program so good that people were paying for it, and other entities will pay for it as well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go on a quick Mark kind of soapbox rant here for a second. All right. So a couple years ago, I had a guest on my show, Brandon Shelton, and I don't know exactly where he pulled this from, and so I can't necessarily like verify with data, but he told me that the veteran nonprofit cause is the most saturated cause in the nonprofit world. Like we have more nonprofits per capita than anything else. Okay, there's a gazillion of them out there. And all the time I have people come to me, they're like, Mark, I have this idea for this nonprofit. I just want to help veterans. And I'm like, stop. Like, please stop. Whatever you're doing, I can name off 10 that are already doing it. So if you really want to do that, like just go help them out. Go volunteer with them, go donate some money, whatever. Okay. Uh, and you're right. I love this distinction of we've kind of been trained in greens, taught you don't have to pay for anything, right? Trust me, everybody out there in the civilian world is happily paying for courses like this. Okay. I remember I was at a veteran networking event and there was a nonprofit table set up and there was a group of people in uniform who were like 12 to 18 months out and they were talking about resumes. And the person at the table was like talking to them. They're like, if you're a veteran, you should never, ever pay for someone to work on your resume. Okay. Okay, that's a thought. I will tell you that I've looked at a number of resumes from these veteran transition groups. They suck. Not all of them. Sometimes you see some really good ones. A lot of them are hot garbage. Okay. Um, Meanwhile, while veterans are out there, working with these groups to get a potentially really crappy resume done, the same people who are non-veterans who are applying for the same job that you are paying 300-400 bucks or whatever to go to someone to get a very polished resume that's going to stand out more than yours will. Okay. So this like idea, like we get wrapped in this blanket of security while you're in uniform of if I need my taxes done, well, it's free and it's on base. If I need financial counseling done, it's free and it's on base. If I need this done, that done, whatever, I have this direct resource to go to. Okay. And I want to like erode this intuition for our community of I should never have to pay for anything like career advancing related because you are missing out on good opportunities out there with that mentality.
I couldn't agree more. And let me kind of give a couple anecdotes here, and then I'll tell you what success looks like with our program. So it's kind of a axiom: you get what you pay for. You do. And honestly, I remember over my time in the military, I got really accustomed to really shitty service. I just did,
Yeah.
right? And I'll tell you what, 10 years removed now into the private sector, I love paying for stuff. I love it because I know what I'm getting, and if I don't get what I
Yeah.
want, I get my money back.
Yeah.
Period.
So
Right?
sometimes when you get a free service, you get what you pay for, which is nothing.
Which is nothing. And
Yeah.
and so behind beside the behavioral aspect of that and just kind of getting used to it and making an expectation, it really does erode your success or your chances of success, which is unfortunate. Again, because I am a huge advocate, I believe service members crazy capable, but not set up for success. And that's just yet another symptom. Let me kind of focus on something you were talking about with resumes, right? We view this totally differently, right? Um, it's not a resume problem. It's not an interview problem. It's a I don't know what I want to do problem, right? Once you, again, part of our curriculum, part of our system is giving you agency and autonomy. Well, what does that mean, Jason? Here's what it means, right? We give you the tools to go explore industries on your own, right? Once you go explore industries, and remember, 18 months to 3 years before you get out, so you have time, you've got a model, you've got mentors, you figure out how to do it, and you get really good at it. So you start necking down to what industry you want to go into. Once you find the industry and the company, the resume is easy. Do it with AI. Get the job description, put in your stuff, and you can have it done. That is actually the problem you need to solve, not the resume, not the resume, right? And then the interview becomes easy because you've done all these things with the private sector involvement and you know how to speak like the job you want and the industry you want. So you're not making anything up, no longer a veneer, it's real, right? And the people listening to you know it's real and they look at it and they go, that's a great candidate. That is what our vision is for this workforce, right? We want to empower a crazy powerful veteran workforce that is aligned to the private sector, knows what industry and company it wants to go into before it ever gets out of the military. And we're doing that, right? So that's really important. Let me tell you what success looks like. I got a great case study for you right here. So, case study, his name was Cray, right? He was a Marine, XO, and he was a Cobra pilot, right? So he's a busy guy, and he was in his last 15, 16 months. He joined PreVeteran, right? Went through the 5-week course, went into the community, and then using our tools and our iterative models that we have them go use over and over and over again, he explored the aerospace defense industry, ruled it out because it wasn't a healthy industry at the time, pivoted to explore financial services, ruled it out for cultural reasons, right? Just didn't like the feel, and then went to oil and gas. Found it, loved it, networked. Once he down selected his industry, he ended up having two companies competing for him, made an additional 30 grand. He would actually say his return on investment with us was 50x, but we're only advertising 30x just because 50x sounded ridiculous.
What I really like about this story is well a bunch of things, but in particular the first two industries you brought up are ones that I see people flocking to all the time, right? Veterans love to leave the military and go to aerospace and defense. In particular, I mean you got to imagine a Cobra pilot, like someone and some contractor is going to hire this guy, right? Uh, but he's like, no, this isn't going to work because I did the industry research. This is going to be more fight than it's worth for me to get a job here right now. Okay. On the other side, I see people all the time go into financial industry and they're like, I feel like typically they're like, I like managing personal finances. This would be great. I want to go do this. Sounds like I make money here. And then you kind of find out about the reality of the culture and everything. And you're like, oh, wow, that's actually not really what I want to go do. So there's a ton of value in just ruling stuff out and taking options off the table to then focus on where you're actually going to thrive. And then when you go do that, we see the case example here of companies were like, the right industry fit the right person. And they were like, yeah, we're going to compete over you because we have a good match here where everybody wins. And that results in happy company. They get a happy employee who's getting paid more for their worth. Everybody wins.
100%. And again, now he's comfortable in that industry, chose those companies, went through the exploration process, went through the down selection process, and then made more money because, like within our community, the additional training, one is a salary and benefits course. I mean, that's that's honestly just a table stake within our community. I mean, we have a bunch of other stuff, but the average earner is able to successfully negotiate an additional 17K above their initial offer. Again, the stuff that's out there in the environment right now is really just discomfort and disorientation in a new environment. That is, if you look at it through that lens, that you could see a host of the problems will be resolved if we start just simply saying these environments are drastically different, period, right? And you need training to get from one to the other. It just simplifies everything. And by the way, that's not us saying, hey, use pre-veteran training. Although I really honestly think we're the only ones that do training to get you from one environment to the other. There's a lot of companies that do coaching, very different. Coaching takes you where you're at and makes you better. Training shows you brand new things you need as a different competency. That's what we do, and that's why it's different. But we're not here to say, hey, if other companies want to develop this training, go for it. But we want to solve the problem of you need training to get from one to the other. But we want to have system-wide change to this because if they're not getting this training, we're going to get what we've got for the last 30 years, which is not good enough, not good enough for the individual member, not good enough for their family, not good enough for the employer, not good enough for the higher ed institution. It is a it is a broken system right now, but we can fix it. We've proven we can fix it. And if we all kind of in concert say the same simple thing, I think we're going to make massive progress as a community.
I feel confident saying I've probably talked to 1,000 veterans since I started doing the veteran professional, whether it be interviews or just side conversations or whatever with people. Uh, there minus one random Marine '06 who was like, TAP was a fantastic program and did a wonderful job at helping me transition from the Marine Corps. Everyone else was like, this shit sucks and needs to change. Okay. So we recognize like the system ain't working. Okay. And I also want to make the distinction of you kind of mentioned the difference between training and coaching, okay, which I think is helpful. It also doesn't mean they have to be mutually exclusive. Like you can do one and then go do the other also, okay? This doesn't have to be a right or left kind of choice. You can do both.
100% agree. But what we're kind of saying is what we see with a lot of other, like, let's say coaching related companies is, hey, tell me about your passions. Hey, tell me about your next mission and stuff like that. From our lens, right? You're rooting this to your military identity. That's problematic, right? You have to go develop a new identity or be moving toward a new identity to have it rooted in your next environment, not the previous environment. That's my only point. But your point is well taken. Once you get the training and become acclimated or more acclimated to the private sector, hell yeah, coaching's great, because it's now sitting in the right environment in our view.
Yeah, yeah. Um, awesome. Well, Jason, we're winding down to the last few minutes here and everything. And I want to give you a couple of minutes at the end to kind of write your last parting shots and everything. I just want to touch on real quick that point you kind of just made about that separation of like your military identity and everything. And a problem I encounter with folks a lot is feeling like their identity in post-military life has to be tied to their work. Okay. The kind of joke quip I always make about my time in the army was, well, the army wasn't a job, it was a lifestyle choice. It kind of dictated how I dressed, how I cut my hair, where I lived. Working out wasn't just something I did to be healthy. It was like part of my job, right? And so then we put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we leave to then tie that same type of identity focus to our post-military employment. And when we go do something, maybe it doesn't have that same feeling when we had when we woke up every day with the flag on our shoulder, serving the country. We're like, I'm screwing up. I'm failing this somehow. I'm cutting myself short. When you can find a different meaning for work in your life and find another meaning for whatever is like your existential purpose going on, and all those things don't have to be directly interconnected with one another, and that all happens when you start being able to shed your military identity away from yourself.
Yes, and build, once you understand how the private sector functions, how it organized and how it makes money and how you fit in there, it's actually crazy exciting. I mean, it becomes in in my view, honestly, way more dynamic, honestly, outside of, being in war zones. And so I get that. But The private sector is so it's way less certain than the military actually. So the feeling that they have of uncertainty right now individually, companies feel that every day, every second of every day. So, and once you kind of understand that, you know how to get into that, you know how to bring your talents to bear. It's incredibly rewarding. It's just I want to show them that there's life after that, right? It's actually honestly better. I would never go back to the government sector actually ever, just because I found it so dynamic. So we'll do another one, Mark, down the road to kind of to. There's some other stuff we could talk about, but I know you want me to finish up here, so I'll give my my final chat here.
Okay, well, sorry, my second to last question, because you already
Yeah.
know what my last question is going to be. You did your recon, you did your homework ahead of time, Jason. You mentioned some numbers around people increasing salary and everything.
Mhm.
Do you have any other kind of top of the line stats for folks, maybe like throughput through your programs and everything, just give people a sense of scope of what you all have done at PreVeteran?
Yeah, so I would estimate we've had about 400 people go through our program over the last 4 years ish, or 4 or 5 years now. We still remember we're getting people 18 months to 3 years before they get out. So we're now
Yeah,
starting to get through our first cohorts, right?
yeah, yeah.
Actually. So Cray is one of the success stories. He's been in the job 2 years. We have Alexis, who went from program manager at Hill, is now working for Defense Unicorns, has been promoted 3 times. So I'm not aware of people who went into these jobs who have job hopped at all. They've been in their jobs, gotten promoted and stuff like that. But um, so we're waiting on more data to come in as they transfer out of the pre-veteran system. But I could tell you, we've established a lot of trust and we still have great personal connections with everybody that goes through because we stay with you from the first 5 week course through you getting employment. And then you want to come back and mentor a group, right? Because you had a great experience. So that's what I have right now for you, Mark. So I don't have your traditional time to hires and
No,
we,
no, no.
yeah,
Even just 400 people have gone through the program
yeah,
is
yep.
impressive. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and our cohort size is now 3 times a year, 40 to 60, and we're starting to, it's just good, but I know we could scale more. We want more impact. We want to help more people.
Absolutely. Awesome. Awesome. We'll get to the final question and wrap up here in a second. Um, so every guest that comes on my show, Jason, asks them, you know the question ahead of time. You did your recon, you know your homework. What was your favorite and or was the best and or worst chow hall you ever experienced in the Air Force?
Love it. Okay, so I'm gonna do best first. It was actually in Pakistan when I was
Oh, okay.
austere
Exotic.
location. And honestly, it was such a shithole that the food had to be good, right? I mean, it was banger. So they really did a nice job with the food there. The worst was the Academy. My God. And how can you fault them for, whatever the Chow Hall, Mitchell's Hall or whatever, where you're serving like 4,000 people in 25 minutes. It just can't be good. It's like, eh.
Okay, back to an earlier part of our conversation where we are talking about this audience is good at calling out bullshit and like seeing through the veneer. I've had that say too many people have come on here and be like, "Oh, the Chow Hall at West Point or the one at the Naval Academy or something." I'm like, "No way, no way." I've eaten there once or twice myself. Like, it's fine, it's fine, but
Well,
don't sit here and tell me that was the best place you ate.
all
Bullshit.
all things
Yeah,
are relative, Mark, right? I mean,
yeah.
remember, the services are different when it comes to that stuff. So I didn't spend a lot of time around Army or Marine Corps chow halls. So, relatively, I guess, and honestly, it's been, what, 30, 25 years or whatever since I was at the academy. Maybe it's great now. I have no idea, but I suspect with the pace of government and the change in government, it's tastes just the same.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, awesome. So to close this out, Jason, anything that we didn't get to that you want to leave out for the crowd?
Yes, we probably should have teased this way up front, but we know that this is a different kind of program for people, and so I do want to offer up my time. One is I'm going to give for you to put in your show notes like a quick 30-minute meeting if you want to learn more about our program. The second is we're giving away 5 scholarships. We have so we are a for-profit, but we have a non-profit sister, which is the Pre-Veteran Foundation that is understand that scholarships is going to be another part of our way to get people trained more. So they've offered up 5 scholarships for your listeners to go in. So each scholarship is essentially $1,000. So it's a great value, and we'd love to have your listeners who are interested to learn more talk to me and interested to go through the next cohort, which starts in May. That would be great to have that, Mark.
Okay, okay. And for everyone listening, I'm just gonna put this stuff up in the show notes. I'm not gonna put it on my newsletter or anything. Mostly just protect Jason's calendar. I don't want 10,000 people or something signing up for 30-minute sessions with him. Okay, but that's awesome. It's extremely generous, and I appreciate you putting that out, Jason. That's really fantastic for this crowd. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show, your time, everything you're doing for our community, the deliberate nature by which you're doing it. I really appreciate. So everyone still listening, please like, subscribe, leave a review. If you're not signed up for my newsletter, please go to theveteranpro.com, check out my social medias. You'll find it there. So Jason, thanks again for coming on the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.